Welcome back to Painting with Mrs. T. Today we are going to be doing a northern landscape scenery. So first, what we're going to do is you are going to get all of these colors. They should be on the tables for you. We're going to start out with taking a medium-sized brush. We're going to just do some northern lights right here. So we're going to follow these lines. We're going to curve it because the northern lights do curve. So I'm going to move it sideways. Now, you're just making a line for right now so you can follow where it's going. We're going to make 3 of these. So just follow those happy little lines. Just follow those happy little lines, friends. All the way up here. We're going to curve that line. Curve this line even more. And what we're going to do, friends, is we're going to take a dry brush. We're going to just stroke up so we can get some different lines going from there. Now the acrylic paint sometimes dries a little too quick, so if you need to, take that medium brush again, make some more lines. And then using that dry brush, again, dry brush is where you don't have any paint on it. And you just move that brush up. What happens with this is the paint gets moved with that. We're going to take our medium brush again, fix those little spots that might need a little more spots to go off of, then dry brush those up. So we're going to work on that second line now. We're going to just work on that bottom line for right now and then move it up so we get those lines that go up. Now it's okay if it goes into that other one. Okay, we're just working right now on working on those lines. Moving that up, give it that texture. We've talked about that in class with our elements of art, right? Giving it texture to make it look like it's shining and curving and going in one direction. We're going to work on this bottom line now. This one's the farthest one that's back. We're going to work on it. Move that dry brush up. Maybe give a little bit more paint with that medium brush. And then dry brush it up again. It's just a continuous cycle, friends. Bring it up even more. Then you can do it with that top line. Just bring those lines up until they go off the canvas. Then what we're going to do is we're going to just bring some of that paint. We're going to tap our paper. We're just going to give a little bit more white going on in there. Now you can get a different brush if that helps, because we need to have some of those lines go straight up, even farther up. Once you feel that you've got the right amount, then you'll move on to the next one. Mrs. T is not quite there yet. She's getting there, but need to keep working on it. So, what we're going to do, we're going to take this medium brush again. We're actually going to pull a little bit of that blue in there. And we're just going to very, very softly start those lines and then take our dry brush up to give it a little bit of color. It should illuminate those northern lights. So make sure you're dry brushing that up. Continue to dry brush that. Give it a little bit more colors and lines. It's totally okay if you choose not to do blue, if you want to start with red or with the yellow. It's totally up to you. Right, just keep following that color. You can move that brush up. If you want to blend it a little bit, just move that dry brush right in between there. Just keep moving that line. Make sure you stay on the bottom of the colors as you go up. Maybe change up the colors here and there. So maybe I'll add a little bit of yellow. Bring that dry brush up. And then repeat on the other two. You can go ahead and choose whatever colors that you want to use. I'm going to bring a little bit of purple in there, just because it's underneath. Give it a little bit of difference in there. Dry brush that up into the white so it looks very luminous. If you need to, friends, you can also use a water jar to clean off your brush and a paint jar. And also a little bit of paper towels to dry it off. So I'm going to bring some of that color back into that second line. Remember the darker on the bottom, so then it gives it a nice contrast. We've talked about that in class too. Use that dry brush and bring it up. Remember to bring it straight up, so right into that white. I'm going to add maybe a little bit of blue in there. You guys can choose whatever color you want because this is your own painting. So I'm going to dry brush that blue straight up into it. If you notice, if you use the dry brush in between those colors, it actually blends them together quite well too. So we're going to give a little bit more blue in there. Dry brush that up into the white. So then it gives that illumination and that color that it brings in. Remember, make sure you're scraping a little bit on the side, so because you really don't need all that much of that color yet. And dry brush that into the top. It gives it a nice spiky look to it, making it illuminating the white. I'm going to come back and bring that purple in to that blue, so I can blend a little bit easier. Bring that into the white. I'm going to start my third one right over here. We're going to have a little bit green. We haven't used green yet, if you're following with Mrs. T. We're going to bring that green right in there. Make sure right after you paint that on, you're dry brushing up into that one because the acrylic paint dries pretty quickly. So we don't want to lose that wetness of it. As you dry brush, it actually dries too. That's why it's called a dry brush. So we're going to keep moving those lines over. And just move that line up. We're going to use a yellow because yellow and green are right next to each other on the color wheel. We've talked about that in class too. I'm going to just very lightly go over that green so it can blend together pretty smoothly. And then remember, dry brush. Just keep going back to that dry brush and moving that line and that color up so it looks like it's illuminating it. If you also want to kind of dry brush in between the green and the yellow, that might help too with illuminating it. Add a little bit of yellow into the green, mix it in just a little bit, and go up and down. Make sure you're following those lines, friends. So we've got our northern lines here. You can go ahead and clean those brushes. Make sure you keep that dry brush dry. Mrs. T just accidentally washed her dry brush, so she's going to grab another dry brush. You can clean that medium brush out, or you can grab a new one. Preferably clean that out. Make sure you get a paper towel and clean that up. We're going to actually move on to the mountain now. So we're going to start with a blue, because right now we don't really need to have a definite color. We're just going to make the shape of the mountain. You can do a whole bunch of hills and crevices in it. If you want to make a mountain that looks behind it, make sure you add that in. Then come over here and grab a little bit of white, bring that down, kind of pull it down so you can thin it out. We're just going to just dab right on the canvas. Mrs. T's other dry brush kind of fell off the easel also. That's okay, we'll pick it up here in a bit. So make sure you're staying on one side of your canvas. See how Mrs. T is painting those mountains on one side? It's because we're only seeing one side for right now. I'm gonna bring it down, get a little bit more white, maybe highlight some of that in there. Maybe it's on one side. Notice how I'm not stroking it. I'm just pressing it. I'm just doing little dots. Sometimes it's easier to have some paint on it. Sometimes it's easier to dry brush it. You can stroke a little bit of it, but it's much more easier to work with when you dab it. Ms. T's gonna bring a little bit of purple in to get that other side of the mountain. We're gonna mix it a little bit with the white and the blue to make it a little darker, to give that other side a little darker. So you might notice it's not showing up very well, so we need to bring in a little bit more purple. Maybe a lot more purple, we'll see. Bring that in. Add just a little bit of white to it, maybe add a little bit of blue, and then work that in. Now remember friends, we're actually cutting the mountain right in half with our paint and that color. So then we can see the difference between the one side with the light blue and the other side with the light purple. But we don't want it to disappear on us. We like mountains, so. And you can play with this as much as you want. You can maybe add in a little more of that light blue and make another mountain right in front of those mountains. Make sure that you have that white and that blue, not the purple in it. So maybe get a different brush at this point to work that in. Maybe bring it on the other side with the blue, and then go in and make those mountains that are in front of it too. Make sure that you're going back in and adding that shadow, that other side of the mountain. I'm going to come down here and actually do that one first, and I'm going to come back in with that blue, maybe add a little bit back into it, but I'm also going to come back over it so it's overlapping. I'm going to bring some of that purple back in so I can get that shade on the other side. Maybe a little bit right there. Maybe come back into those other mountains. Give a little bit more of the dotted textures. Then I'm going to pull my medium brush. I'm actually going to make a little bit of highlights in there for that snow. Because we all love snow and the Iowa weather that we have, right, friends? Yeah. And you can just dab it, or you can paint it on like what we normally do with our paints, and we stroke it, but I'm going to stick with the dots for right now. Give it some definition and some texture, like our elements of art, friends, that we've talked about in class. So far we've talked about texture, we've talked about contrast, we've talked about value and blending our colors together. And we're actually adding this into our painting that we're doing. Isn't it funny how the world comes back around? So we're gonna do a little bit more white spots on here. If you're good with the amount of snow that you have on there, then you can just stop right there and wait for Mrs. D to get done. And it's okay to be different, right? Our creativity is different from everybody else. So, it's okay to be different. If it doesn't look exactly the same, that's okay, because we're working on our creativity. So once you have that, then you're going to blend that out. I'm going to actually add a little bit more of that light purple down here so we can blend it out a little easier. So using that dry brush that you have, we're going to blend those out. Give it a little texture. Make sure you're always following those angles and you're going the direction that those dots are going, right, friends? Bringing that out. Dry brushing that out. Remember, if you have a mountain that's in the background, you might want to do it first before you do the one in front. We all make mistakes. And it's not just mistakes. It's happy little accidents. So I'm going to bring those colors out just a little more. More. And if you want, you can blend right in between too to give that difference. Sometimes it helps having those blending in to give those different textures to it. So what we're going to be doing next is we are actually going to be making some happy little trees like you all have been waiting for. So what we're going to do, we're actually going to mix some blue with some white. It's going to be a lot of blue in this painting and project that we're doing, and that's okay. If you want to mix some of that purple in to give it a little darker tone, that is fine too. So Mrs. T's got this purple and white and blue all mixed together. We're just going to make some happy little trees. So you're going to just start on the side, and we're going to just do some dabbing. Okay, if you want, you can do that Northern Lights technique that we talked about to give it a different texture. Totally up to you what you choose to do. I might stick with the dots or with both of them. We'll see. We're just going to go right across this mountain line. Now we don't want to go over where we faded out because we like that look. So make sure you, as the line goes down with the trees, you gradually get shorter and shorter trees as if it's going towards the mountain, right? Our trees are going to be bigger and taller than the mountain because they're closer to us. And as you go along, you can actually give it some texture. You can also make it go back and forth to give it some different lines and texture. Bring it out. Maybe bring it down. Have some of those lines. I'm going to add a little bit more of that color in again. We're going to do those lines again. And don't worry about it looking like it's not trees right now, because we're going to go back in and add a little bit of snow and a little bit of different colors in there too. Just keep going up. If you want to make it a little darker, that's fine also. You just add a little bit of purple or a little bit of blue. Sometimes it's more fun and creative to have different colors involved with this painting. Involved with any of your paintings that you do. Don't be afraid to think outside the box and think creatively. Those always come out to be some of the best artists too. So we've got some trees in here. We're going to add a little bit of white. We're going to actually not use this paintbrush actually. We're going to bring in one of our medium brushes. You can use a fan brush. A fan brush might actually work a lot better for you. So we're going to take some of these, just light dabs, maybe thin it out, and then just barely tap. Start tiny and then go out. Maybe even move that brush around to give it some different lines. Maybe it looks like it's all around the tree. If you don't want to add snow to the tree, that's fine too. Totally up to you what you choose to do. If you want to also kind of blend it in too, that could work also to give it a different texture. If you do that, you need to make sure you're doing that with all the others too. Otherwise it looks kind of strange. I'm going to get a little bit more snow in there. And I don't know about you, but I like talking to trees and animals. I know that's a little weird, but I have more fun than most people do. As you go out, the whiter the snow is too. If your paint's still wet, you might notice that it's kind of blending in. Also, that is totally fine. Sometimes that gives it a really good shading and shadow effect to those trees. If you want to add some more darker blue or darker purple, you can do that too. It could give some different definitions to it, like it's popping out, kind of like our 3D and our shapes and forms that we use. But the closer that tree is to you, make sure it's more lighter so then we can actually see those colors. So just keep tapping. Make sure that you have those lines in there. If you don't want to add the snow, like I said earlier, you can just wait to skip this step. Snow sometimes adds that texture and makes the picture come all together as a whole. It gives it a nice balance to the picture. We can also go a little crazy too. We can also use our fingers just to give it a little bit more texture too. Now friends, we do not put our fingers on other people's noses if we have paint, right? Right. Because we don't go that crazy. Just a little crazy. We're almost done with our snow. We're going to add just a little bit of more snow. We're going to actually just use white this time. We're going to just dry brush that across so then it looks like it's going behind the trees. It's okay that if there is some black underneath the mountains too, because, you know, the farther back it is, the less color it actually has. If you want, you can actually get a bigger brush too. Make sure that you kind of going back and forth. It's okay if you want to go over those mountains. Those mountains should be dry now. If you want to add a little bit of clouds in there. Looks like Mrs. T made a mistake. Well, we don't make mistakes. We just make happy little accidents and we move it. So since I made that, I might actually add some clouds in here. Just a little bit, because northern lights don't really show in a cloudy sky, so we don't want to overwhelm it with our clouds. Maybe a little up here. We're going to bring that back down. We want just a little bit more. If we want, we can also add a little bit of blue in there. Blue gives the snow a little bit of definition in it. Bring that more in. It's okay if you go over those trees. Doesn't have to be perfect. Just working on those lines. You see how if you add just a small amount of blue, it gives it a different texture and definition to it. It also gives a different shape and form to the picture as a whole. I might add in some more white. Now it's okay if you have too much white, just make sure you spread it out. Maybe in one spot, maybe in more spots. Totally up to you, friends. Might add in a little bit more white on this side, just to give it a more hill shape. Looks like it's got a hill in front of it. Gotta have some of those mounds for the snow. Maybe add a little bit more snow in here. I'm barely pressing this, guys, so you don't need to have much. You can also bring some of those in the direction of your mountains so then it looks like it's still actually continuing down the mountain, friends. Make sure you don't go into the trees though, you don't want to miss some of those. Looks like I made a few spots. I'm going to bring some of that snow back on top of that. If you want, you can actually bring some of that texture down into the snow also. That gives it a good texture. I'm going to bring some up here, give it some different textures. Now you don't want to overwhelm it though, because then if you have too much white, then you're going to lose the blue and purple trees in the background. So we're going to come in here and we're going to actually add some smaller trees on here. We're not going to do a lot of them. We're just going to do a small amount, so then we can have some balance in here. Now we're going to start a little shorter than the ones that we had on the other side. Just, if you want, you can just bring those out and those lines. We all like trees, don't we, friends? Some happy little trees. If you bring some out there, make sure you move that around. Maybe get some more color again. Maybe it's in front of the tree that we just made. Let's make 2 trees. I think 2 trees is a good number. If you want to add 3, that's totally up to you, friends. So, I'm going to make this tree back here a little darker. We'll go over this a little bit more with snow here in a little bit. I'm going to add a little bit of that. And I think I might make this tree right here a little purplish color. Or I guess blue, because my colors for some reason are not going the way I need them. But that's okay, friends. We've talked about that. So we're going to do some more of the white in here with our snow. And make some snow spots. Now remember, friends, like I said, we can actually use our finger to go in there and give it some texture. Maybe add a little bit more paintbrush. But like we said before, we don't want to overwhelm it with that snow. If we overwhelm it, then we lose that tree, right? So maybe do some more finger painting. You should be wearing an apron, so if you're using that apron, you can actually wipe it on your apron. I'm wearing jeans, so I can use my jeans. Adding a little bit more white in here to give that snowy look to the tree, to also tie it into this other side too. Since they're closer, we see the color more. We're also going to add in a little bit down here with a little bit more of a yellow and a blue. Giving it a little different of a color. Might add some purple in too. Not a ton though, because when we mix yellow and purple, then we get more of a brownish color, right, friends? Because complementary colors give it a more brownish color. Bring some of that in. We're going to bring a lot more white in so we can make it lighter, because the closer it is, the prettier the colors we get, right? Maybe add a little bit more blue in. And it's always just practice with our paintings. We're never going to be quite where we want to be, and that is okay, because practice makes the best. I'm going to add a little bit of bushes in here. Not trees, bushes, friends, where all the little critters live. It's in the winter time, so I don't know if there's any critters in there. We're going to also repeat this on the other side. Maybe need to bring more blue in to kind of stand out from those trees that we just made. It's okay if it's a darker blue, it doesn't have to be light. Okay, we've already got white snow down here, and we don't want to make it all disappear. So I'm going to add a little bit more blue in, because we can go back over this with whites to make it look like it's a snowy bush. We can also add some purple in to give it some darkness. If we want to, also, we can be a little more crazy and add a little bit of red in there. Give it a more purpley shade to it, maroonish crimson shade to it. And we'll go back over that again here in a little bit with our white while it dries. So as we had the little bit of red in here, we're actually going to bring in a little bit of white to give it a more snowy texture to it. It does bring out a little bit of color and warmth into the painting. We can also add this on the other side of our bush. Make sure that you just kind of add it in. If you want, you can also take that dry brush that we had and you can just move it around. You can add a little bit on that side. Now we had some red that was in our paintbrush from the dry brushing. That's okay. It gives a little bit of definition and color into it. It gives it also a little bit of shading and shadow. Okay. Find that dry brush that doesn't have any paint on it. Bring it over here. Get a little bit of white. And then add in that white. Do it in random spots so then you can have that pop out a little more. You can also bring in more just straight white so it can pop out from that landscape that we had in the background. The red that we have put in there could also be berries. Some of those critters like berries, but like we said, it's winter time. More than likely those animals and critters are not in those bushes. Speaking of critters, I've recently rescued a green and blue rare lemur squirrel. His name is Silvert. We've been nursing him back to health, and so far he seems to be getting better for the most part. He had an encounter with a wild dog, so he's slowly getting nursed back to health, and we'll soon release him, possibly in the next week or so. As we come back to this painting, I'm going to add a little bit more white into these trees, just to give it a little bit more definition to it. And since we have a winter landscape, it's kind of cold and kind of sad looking, so we're going to actually bring in a cabin to brighten up the painting. So what we're going to do is we are going to grab a medium brush. We're going to have a little bit of brown. We're going to mix some of that yellow in to give it a more vibrant color. And we're just going to start with those shapes. Remember how shape is a 2D version. We're not going to make it 3D quite yet, but we're going to slowly add that in. We're also going to grab a little bit of white to brighten it up just a little bit more. Maybe add a little more brown to darken it up. Try to find that right color that you want your cabin to be. Maybe you need to add a little of black. In my version, we're going to add a little bit of purple. It'll darken it up just a little bit. So I'm going to bring that in. We're going to just do this right here in this corner, right by the trees that are on the left side of your canvas. And we're just going to go ahead and make a square right now. And it's okay if you go over those bushes that we just made. We'll go back over those with snow, so then it looks like they are in front of our cabin over here. So we've got our cabin's shape. I added that front door, that front part of the house, not the front door, the front part of the house. And I gave it a little bit of a slant, so it looks like it's going back towards that tree. And it's okay, again, if you accidentally go over that bush. Look, Mrs. T is going over it. Like we've said before multiple times in this video, sometimes it's not mistakes, it's just happy little accidents. So we're going to have that in. If you guys want, you can bring in some of that black, that darker color, and then make some lines on there. You can also add a little bit more white, so then it gives it a more wood landscape, or wood texture, right? Adding a little bit more white in. Maybe adding a little yellow in too, to give it that warm, cozy feeling of a cabin in the middle of a forest, in the middle of winter time. We have winter break coming up, so this is what most of you guys will be doing if you're not in Florida already. So, got some of this. I'm going to make that front part of the cabin a little darker. I'm going to bring in that texture. Add a little bit of purple. If you want, you can do more of a black color. I'm adding purple, so then we're not wasting any paint or colors. I'm going to bring in a little bit more. I'm actually going to bring in a little bit of blue too, so then it can tie together with all of our white landscape. But we don't want it to get so dark that we lose that comfy feeling. So I made that one darker. I'm also going to go ahead and paint the roof. I'm actually going to be adding purple and blue to that brown. I'm going to add that roof. So we've got that roof. We're going to slant that. It's kind of a sideways roof. Slant it sideways. Maybe bring it down also. It's okay if it looks a little wonky for right now, because we'll go back in and add some snow on top of that roof. Adding a little bit more of that. We're also going to bring that color that we've been using for that front and actually bring it up into that roof. Gives it a little bit of texture and shade. We've talked about shade. That's a form of value in our class, right? So once we've got that, then we can go ahead and we can add those darker lines on the side. If you want, this is where you can get a smaller brush, a really tiny brush. This is really small. And you can add in those lines to give it a different wood texture. Might have to keep coming back in, going back out. As you put those lines, it gives the texture of wood, which is what we need in a cabin in the middle of the forest. If you want to, you can take one of your paintbrushes and you can get a lot of yellow. Actually add a warm little window so it looks like someone's in the cabin. Maybe it's hunters going out for a cabin weekend trip. We also need to add our door. This is where I'm going to add more darker colors in. So maybe more of a brown and a red color. Maybe a little bit of green mixed in, because remember friends, green and red mixed together, you get more of a brownish color. We need it darker, so maybe add more blue to get that darker color. And then what we're going to do is we're going to just go ahead and paint that door. Maybe get a bigger brush, that could work too. Mix all those colors together again. And you've got a door. We also need to add those lines for that other side to give that wooden texture. Probably would have been better to do this before we added the door, but we don't make mistakes, we just make happy little accents like Mrs. T has been showing this whole entire video. So as we bring it out, we're going to actually kind of have some of that brown coming off, because with the snow it actually reflects that same color into the snow. So we're going to dry brush that out. I'm actually going to add a little bit more white in there to kind of fade it out, because we want it to look like that snow is coming up over it. It's the same thing for our rooftop. We're going to add a little bit of white in. If you want to just spot it, that's fine. That'll give it a different texture. Maybe add a little texture on the other side too. If you want to do more of a smoother look to it, just go ahead and take your white and then just smooth it out with a medium brush. Totally up to you what you want to do. because it's a brownish black roof, it's not going to be totally white, and that's totally fine, right? So I'm going to bring my white back in. I'm going to go over it just a little bit more just to give it some texture. I'm also going to come back over here and put some white back in those bushes, so then it looks like it's in front of that cabin, right? I'm going to bring some of that snow back in. Might actually even bring some blue with that color, so then it looks like the snow is coming up over it. Bring some more snow back through here. And there we go. We have a winter landscape with a cabin emphasis. Thank you so much for following along. I hope you enjoyed Mrs. T's painting, and I hope that you enjoyed painting with yours and being creative and doing your own painting. It doesn't have to look exactly like mine. It's totally up to you what you want it to look like. Hope you guys have a great winter break. Make sure that you help Mrs. T clean up her paintbrushes. Thank you. Thank you 5th and 6th graders for joining me today with the Elementary Art Club. I really enjoyed doing this winter landscape painting with you guys. You guys are really great. Silver, what are you doing?